We look at Hollow Knight, the Cinquedea, fighting with a buckler, Filipino martial arts, and what all this has to do with the Mastercuts.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
So we have quite something on our plate here. We want to look at the sword, or it's called the nail, of Hollow Knight, and we want to look at the Cinquedea. We want to look at short blades with buckler in use. We want to understand how we can do the so-called master cuts in German, the Meisterheue, which are usually used with a long sword, with such short blades, and what all this has to do with Filipino martial arts. Step 1. The nail from Hollow Knight has an interesting shape, and this blade shape reminds of the Cinquedea, which is a Renaissance or medieval, however you want to fix it in time, type of short sword to dagger, depends what you're looking at, and therefore we want to discuss these two together. Yes, the hand protection is not exactly the same, but the blade shape and therefore also the balance is quite comparable. The Cinquedea is one type of short sword, or some of them are types of short swords that could be used for different types of Fechten, fencing, and therefore we want to discuss with this example specific cuts with shorter weapons, and as these shorter weapons were often combined with the buckler, we also want to look at the buckler. When we take this weapon, we hold it in thumb hold, video on that specifically linked in the description box, and can perform the same basic cuts as the Meisterheue with the longsword. Video on mechanics of the Meisterheue is also linked in the description box. The interesting point is now, as the ratio of arm length versus blade length is different, the cuts look different in comparison to what we see with the longsword. If we perform a Schielhau, we will not be able to strike with the tip to the head of the opponent as we did it with the longsword, but our blade will come in contact with the blade of the opponent before we reach that point. Then the force of the opponent will push our blade aside, so we will have to perform Winden and then move on our blade into the other Meisterhau, the Zwerchhau. That's how Schielhau results with a shorter blade, and also the symmetric version on the other side, which is the Scheitelhau. Same effect, we start with the Scheitelhau, the blade gets pushed aside, we perform Winden and end up in a Zwerchhau. These moves we can find in Filipino martial arts all the time. And not only there, also in German Messerfechten. So this is in fact a hidden master cut. The same applies to the other master cuts that are still missing. We already had now Schielhau, Scheitelhau and Zwerchhau. Missing are Zornhau and Krumpau. These are usually used to strike on the blade of the opponent and then continue. Due to the length differences, these end up in cuts on the arm of the opponent. Once with a long edge, once with a short edge. And also these moves we can find in principle in Messerfechten, although not as specifically, but we find them in different Filipino martial arts styles, especially in anything related to Angel Cabales Serrada. If you look at the lock and block movements, these are basically combinations of Zornhau and Krumpau with some other strikes such as the Knichelhau. And when we look at the Fechtbücher, we have already recognized that, for example, in Talhofer, every technique that was performed with a messer can also be performed with a messer and a buckler. So it should be no surprise that all the moves we just discussed will work in combination with the buckler perfectly, and the buckler will protect the hand holding our sword, in this case our Cinquedea simulator from Hollow Knight, quite nicely. So this is a really cool combination, and I think this prop is my new favorite simulator when we do buckler fencing, because the weighting, the balance of a Cinquedea or this Cinquedea simulator is really interesting. It's very different from a messer because weight is much closer towards the hand, but it's still a weighty, a heavy weapon, and it's not super lightweight as some of the other weapons where balance is closer to the handle. Therefore, I can understand that there is historically this emphasis of the Cinquedea in some regions, because I think this is a very strong weapon with which you can do quite a lot if you use it in thumb hold. There are videos about how you should hold a Cinquedea, and some people have also argued that there could be historical reasons to hold it in thumb hold. In my view, this only makes sense in this direction. So what can we learn from this little experimentation? One aspect I think is that in general, shorter swords can be used for performing the so-called Mastercuts, but they look a bit different. And this seems to have been recognized already in medieval times, because in the manuals, if we look at the Messerfechten techniques, they also look exactly like that. They are usually not addressed to with the terms of the Mastercuts, but they use clearly the same mechanics. We can also see that these moves are very common in different Filipino martial arts, and this gives a certain reassurance. Question is, of course, how much is this of a convergent, so independent development of that? We could argue like that because there's a certain mechanics how you can use short blades, and this might be the reason for the similarity. On the other hand, at this time, 15th or 16th century, we already have exchange between Europe and the Philippines, and there might have been also transition of knowledge from one point to the other or intermixing. Anything is thinkable. Research on that is still scarce and also tricky to perform. We also can see that indeed Hollow Knight's weapon, the nail, is a really versatile one, and the prop that you can get on Amazon, for example, is an interesting training tool, because this is a length of blades where the market has not to offer too much stuff, and the close similarity to a Cinquedea is definitely interesting. If you want to make it a bit more Cinquedea looking, you could simply add, for example, a short crossguard and have then an even better match, but it definitely feels different from the common Messer because of the different balancing, and it offers for you a training possibility that was not there before. I am not sure how aware people are of the thumb hold. It's, in my view, very often discussed only with the long sword. I think that this is a much more versatile hold than people admit it. It's interesting, if you go into literature, you will find it in FMA, you will find it, for example, in Cossack martial arts, but not a lot of people seem to use it quite a lot. But with the Cinquedea, I would also say the fact that it is a two-sided sword with a middle point makes it very symmetric in the move and very strong, therefore, with the thumb hold, and this mechanic is really strongly functional. I suggest you test it as well. Maybe it's even interesting for you to get one of the Hollow Knight nails as a training tool. For me, this is really a cool thing to play around with. Overall, we hope we could inspire you with these ideas, and we hope to see you around next time.